Hey.
Hello. Hello.
Hello.
As always, I will wait a couple more minutes to see if more people will join in.
Okay, sure.
So, hi everybody. Not a big audience today, but maybe we can get started. This meeting is recorded, so it might be helpful for people who cannot make it today after all. A quick introduction from my side. for completeness. So my name is Niels Semmelrock. I'm from TNG. I'm with TNG for now 9.5 years. My background is computer science diploma and PhD, and I'm with Magma for over 1 year now. So starting last year, I joined. My main focus was together with Lars, who is also here today, on the make to Bazel migration, but general DevOps work and Slack support, and also handover topics followed shortly after. So today I want to talk about the release process. I will share my screen. So what I'm talking about is basically the content of this issue here. This issue is about documenting the release process, and but of course in this talk I will give more deeper detailed information, and if you have any questions, please jump in. After the meeting, my plan is to publish this documentation, but it's still possible to give feedback to see if something is not detailed enough or even missing. So I will zoom in a little bit. The last Magma release is the 1.8 release. It's already a little bit, it was some time ago, a couple of months. And in the next couple of weeks or months, it might be that a new release will be started. And this documentation is aimed to document the technical steps that are needed there. The documentation itself is loosely based on the last 1.8.0 release, but after the last release, there were a couple of changes. The most prominent one that is needed or interesting for the next release is that the Magma Artifactory was switched. The Artifactory that we are using now is way more restrictive than the last one. During the last release, a couple of artifacts were manually copied from one repository to another and so on, or between distributions. This is not longer possible anymore. The new Artifactory can only be manipulated by workflows. This is the secrets for the workflows are now stored in GitHub, and only workflows can use them. Developers do not have access to these credentials. So we created a lot of workflows that are able to do this, but they were never tested with a real release. So my expectation is that it will not work out of the box immediately. Of course, I hope so. And we, of course, created these workflows having in mind to make it possible to work out of the box for the next release. But as you know, in development, something is not working correctly, something is missing. And my expectation is that for the next release, some changes need to be done during the release. So, but I will come to these special places when it's time. So, another thing is this documentation assumes that the HEW is built with Bazel for the next release. There is a proposal that was accepted, so this assumption is sound. And yeah, let's get started. So at some point, the community has decided that a release is planned. So this means that the master needs to be brought in a certain state, some features needs to be finished, some bugs needs to be fixed. So, but at some point, the community decides that a release can now be started. It is strongly recommended that a dedicated release team is elected or chosen at the beginning. So these people should have certain responsibilities. For example, merges to the release branch, if changes are necessary, should be approved by these people at a single point of contact. And in situations where I don't know, something went wrong or we have special circumstances, this release team should be able to make decisions how to go forward. This team should also organize the communication between the community and the people who are doing the release, and also the communication with end users that are willing to use the new released Magma version. This includes release notes, announcements, etc., etc. But these steps should be decided by the release teams and are not scope of this documentation. This documentation only concerns the technical steps necessary for a release. So the general idea for a Magma release can actually be summarized in one sentence, and this is a release branch is created. On basis of this release branch, all relevant artifacts are published to the test repositories of our Artifactory. These artifacts are tested, and after all tests are done and successful, the artifacts will be promoted to the production repositories. It doesn't matter if someone is here who doesn't know what it means to promote these artifacts in terms of Magma, because I will come to this in detail later. So the general outline is I will talk about how a release branch is created, how third-party artifacts are created and published, how pull requests on release branches can be created if something needs to be fixed, and comparing this to general backporting. Endpoints that needs to be changed in the release branch, what artifacts need to be verified that they were actually created. A short part about testing, actually only a short part, because this is also up to the community and to the release team, how much testing will be done and is needed. The actual release, when the testing is successful, some post steps that needs to be done, and then additional content, how hot fixes can be created and when this is necessary, and in what cases backporting without a hotfix is sufficient. General troubleshooting and some suggestions for further improvements of the release process. So let's jump in. First step is to create a release branch. For this, we need to do a merge freeze on master. So for a certain point in time, we say the master is in a releasable state and we want to create a release branch, and we don't want that people in between push further changes that are not yet planned for the next release. My understanding is the last couple of releases, especially for the 1.8 release where I was participating, this was done by an announcement in Slack. So somebody wrote, please don't merge anything to master right now. But of course, this is a best effort situation. This could be more enforced. There is actually a GitHub app configured called Merge Freeze. This is a test that runs on pull request, and it will fail if there is a merge freeze currently in progress, and then the pull request cannot be merged. But I never used it before. It needs to be configured by people with sufficient rights or credentials for the Magma repository. I just want to note that it is existing, but for now an announcement in Slack was sufficient. Someone with sufficient rights needs to create a release branch now. The name is v1.x, where x is the next minor version. So for the next release, this will be v1.9. And immediately the branch can be pushed. Yeah? And after this, the merge freeze can be lifted. So this will only be a very short situation. There's not much to do. Create a branch, push it. If the branch is pushed, then of course the CI will start. And the CI in this situation is not very important because we didn't change endpoint yet. This was not possible right now for now. But again, the workflows will already start running. The results can actually be neglected for now. They don't matter. The CI will be more important in the next couple of steps. So especially if something is failing, you can ignore it for now. It was just important to create this release branch. So the next step is to create third-party artifacts. We have two workflows to do this, to create them and push them to the release branch. To the release distribution in the Artifactory. This was something that was done manually before. This is, again, not possible anymore. This needs to be done by these two workflows that were newly created. The first one builds the so-called third-party artifacts. If you take a look in our repository, we have a folder third-party. There's build, bin, and there are a couple of scripts. For each script, one artifact is created. The reason is that some of these dependencies are patched. For example, in other cases, certain versions are built. But this needs to be done first. But these scripts are executed by the workflow called Magma build and publish third-party dependencies, and it can be started manually. It needs one parameter, and the parameter is the distribution to be used. And in our case, let's talk about the next upcoming release. In our case, then it's focal -1.9.0. Another third-party dependency is Open vSwitch. This is not covered by the scripts in these folders. This is an additional artifact that is created, or actually these are multiple artifacts, and this is done by the workflow Magma build and publish Open vSwitch artifacts. It also needs a parameter distribution focal 1x0. So important here is that only people who are members of Magma Approver CI can successfully run these workflows. These are guarded. If the person who started the workflow is not in this group, the workflow will fail. So this needs to be made sure before. This is just a guard for security reasons. So this workflow is not started by someone who does not know what he or she is doing. So make sure that people who are working on the release are in the group Approver CI. So of course, these jobs need to be monitored, and afterwards it can be checked if the artifacts were created. And this can be done by just going to our Artifactory. So I already opened the page here. This is the UI overview of the Magma Artifactory, and there is Magma packages test. And if we open it, we see pool here. In pool, we have already distributions for the last couple of releases, for example, for focal 1.8.0. If these jobs were run successfully, we then have a folder focal 1.9.0 here, and we can compare it. If I open it, we see the artifacts, and there, for example, are BCC tools. This is one of the third-party artifacts, BCC build. And if we scroll down, we see, for example, libopen vSwitch with some version. This is one of the artifacts created for Open vSwitch. And it needs to be verified that these artifacts were created and pushed successfully. So as I said, these workflows were created for the next release. They were not yet tested in a real release, and they were tested during development. I expect them to work correctly, but as always, something can go wrong and needs fixing. So at this point, just a note how fixes should be applied to a release branch. And the question you have to ask yourself is a change necessary only on the release branch, or is it a change that is needed on master and on the release branch? If a fix is necessary only on release branch, of course, create a pull request, point it to the release branch, get it reviewed and merged, especially get it also approved by the release team. If this is a change that is also needed on master, then you can follow the already existing backporting documentation. What you basically do is you create a pull request versus master, and after it is reviewed, you can add a tag, apply, in our case, 189, and then it gets automatically, pull request gets automatically created for the release branch. Of course, it needs to be reviewed again, but it's then a more easy process. So we have the release branch. We have created this party artifacts. The next thing is that we need to change a couple of endpoints in our source code so that new artifacts, not third party, but real release artifacts, are created for the next release. So I created this list best of knowledge based on the last release. It might be that something is missing, but then this documentation is in a wiki. It can be extended by everybody. So in various places, we use Docker images, and especially in a couple of cases, we use existing Docker images as a base for other Docker images. And these are published by CI to this GitHub page here. So we have the dev container, Bazel base, we have Bazel caching containers. And what we want to do is we want to pin this for the release. So currently, these are put to the latest tag. So let's go to one example. In this workflow, HEW build, format, and test with Bazel, we actually need to pin these images. So if I open it, and I search for latest, then we see here's one example. The Bazel base image is used. Here's the link to the repository with the latest tag. And on the release branch, we don't want to use the latest tag. We want to use the current image when the release branch was created. So, and what we can do is we go to this page. We see here the Bazel base container. If we click on it, we see the last couple published images. Here's latest. And what we do is we copy this char, change it here on the release branch. And by this image is pinned, and we need to do it for the other cases in this file as well. Yeah, it is in a couple of places.
I don't know if it's just me, but for me, the image is really lagging behind. So I haven't seen any code yet, actually, for the Docker images.
You don't see my IDE?
I see it now, but I think there's like a 10-second lag or something with the screen. At least it's, I don't know if it's the same for everyone, but at least for me, it's lagging quite far behind.
Okay, I will stop the share very quickly and reapply it.
Yeah, the same way. It's about 5, 6, 7 seconds delay.
Okay, do you see my screen again?
Not yet. It says started screen sharing.
Okay, still no IDE visible?
No, it's still not. Yeah, now I can see it. Yeah,
Okay, now it is.
but your video and sound is live, but the screen share is somehow very delayed.
Okay, sorry about that. I will quickly restart Zoom and will rejoin. 1 second. So I will share my screen again. Is it coming?
It seems like it's still delayed, but
Oh yeah,
maybe a
much
bit
better
faster.
now. Yeah,
It's better, or
it's better. Can you move your mouse a couple of times and see if it's quick?
I will scroll a bit.
It's
Yeah, it's
reasonably
probably
fast.
better.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hope this is not too annoying for the recording, but let's see. So let me quickly repeat what I said here. So in the bazel.yaml workflow, this is one example where we use base images that are published on the Magma in the Magma repository. So these are on master tagged with latest. So we want to use the latest image for the release. We want to pin this. And what you can do is you can go to the overview page in this example for the Bazel base image. What we see here is we have a latest tag and we have a char next to the latest tag. And we want to pin this on the release branch to the char. So on master, we can create new images, publishing them, but we don't want to use them on the release branch. So we can copy this and change the latest tag here. And of course, need to do it for the other images as well in the same manner. Quick question, did what I tell you fit to the current screen, what I was showing?
Yeah, I think it's okay. It's still a couple seconds for me, but
yeah. Okay. So, but let's go forward. So this is one point, and the most entries here are for these pinning of the images. Another thing is we need to change focal CI to our distribution for the release focal 190. So same example. If we look into this workflow here, we see that focal CI is here mentioned, and this then needs to be changed on the release branch 190. And below here as well. So the first change was necessary to pin the used images so they can be further developed and master, but have no effect on the release branch. And the change here to focal 190, in this example, the Magma Debian package is built and it needs to be published to the correct location. So this was for the Bazel workflow. In HEW build, publish, and test containers. Actually, nothing needs to be changed here. I only listed this because there's still a to-do, but this to-do is in progress. And when this is fixed, then this entry can be removed completely. Magma build and publish, the so-called build all workflow. And actually in this workflow, nothing has to be changed as well. I just listed this workflow here because this is the workflow that creates by far the most released artifacts. And somebody who does the release might wonder, do I need to change something here? And the answer is no. This workflow only creates Docker images, and not only, but also Helm charts. But if this workflow runs on a release branch, everything should be also already be tagged correctly for the release. In the HEW generate coverage workflow, again, we need to pin in an image, and same for the HEW lint workflow, also pinning an image. So much about the workflows. The next endpoints that needs to be changed are for Docker files, and this can easily be searched for. So the Docker files for the various components are based on artifacts that are in the artifactory, and these are only the third-party artifacts that we published in the static form. So now we want to have these Docker files based on these artifacts, and this is the reason why we couldn't do this change at the very beginning. We first needed to create these third-party artifacts. So what we can do is we can search for Focus CI. This is also in the description. So I do a full text search for Focus CI, restricted to Docker file, and we see a couple of Docker files that have Focus CI mentioned. So actually the first one doesn't need to be changed. It's also written in the documentation, but let's look at one example. Here we have the Docker file for the FEG, for the federated gateway, the Python part. And there we see at the beginning, a repository is set up, the Artifactory is set up on Magma packages test. On master, it's set to Focus CI. For the release branch, we want to have it to 190. Yeah? And this needs to be done for the other Docker files as well. So next one is the VMs. We have a couple of virtual machines. We also had a show and tell session about this. And of course, on the release branch, we also want to execute the integration tests, and not only the artifacts that are tested should be based on the release branch, but also the VM itself. So some third-party artifacts are installed there, for example, Open vSwitch. And of course, we want to test the artifacts that are used for the release. So we need to change this as well. And this is configured in this Ansible role. So I will quickly open it. There we have the Artifactory configured that is used in the various Magma VMs, and this then needs to be changed to 190 as well. The last one are the Helm charts, and I'm honest, I don't have much experience with these Helm charts, but Shubham is here, and Shubham, thank you very much for creating this pull request for the last release. I think this is sufficient for the documentation to have it here, because here Shubham did the update needed on the Helm charts for the release. So you see the file change here, files changed here. So this can, changing the Helm chart versions can be based on this pull request here. So after all these changes are done and are committed to the or pushed to the release branch, we want to verify again that all artifacts are created. And this can be summarized to, we have Debian artifacts, we have Docker artifacts, and we have the Helm charts. For the Debian artifacts with the Basel change, these are actually only 3 artifacts that are created. Before it were a lot more, but all these other artifacts are now included in these Debian artifacts. So we have Magma, this is basically the LTE HEW. We have Magma SCTPD and the new Magma DHCP as CLI that is now published separately. So, and what you can do is you can again go to Magma packages test, pool, focal 190 in the would it be then? And if you scroll down, for example, we have where's Magma? We have, for example, here Magma SCTPD. So here should be one created then with 190. Magma with 190, and the CLI tool is not included here because it's new. It should be created as well. So then the Docker images, you need to check the repositories called Magma Docker, then the component name, test, and then the image, and then see that the image with the tag 1.9 is created. To give you one example, let's scroll up. Let's have a look at Magma Docker FEG test. So FEG is the component, but it needs to be checked for all other components as well. And when we open it, we have actually 2 images here. I think HTTPD is an artifact. Let's take a look in Gateway Python. Loads some time on my end. So, and there we have all the artifacts published from master, and they are tagged with the commit jar. And for releases, we will have the released version as a tag. So for 1.8, we already have it. For the 1.9 release, of course, there then would be 1.9. And you can click on it, see the timestamp when it was created. So this is just a quick smoke test to see if all the artifacts are created. The last one is to verify that the Helm charts are created. You can find them in Magma Helm test repository, and you are looking for file names of the form some component 190.tgz. So let's have a quick look. Magma Helm test is here. And again, there are a lot of artifacts that are created on the current master. Let's scroll down. FB internal is outdated, but for example, FEG orchestrator, and then you see here 180. So this is for the 1.9 release, we would then have FEG orchestrator -190 TGZ, and for the other components as well. This should be verified. Okay, questions so far? What we have now is we created a release branch, we pushed the third-party artifacts, we changed the endpoints, pushed this change and verified that the release artifacts were created. And these are Debian files, Docker images, and Helm charts. Then I will go forward. The next one is testing. And this section might be a lot shorter than you might have expected. So the first thing is CI. Of course, all workflows should be successful. If they are not successful, of course, they need to be analyzed. Maybe something needs to be fixed. And Again, all workflows are important and should be green, but maybe most focus should be, at least at the beginning, on the integration tests. We had a show and tell session about the Magma CI, where I showed you the overview page where the integration test results of different runs are listed and summarized. And the goal is to have one green line there. Everything should be green. Especially the integration tests are still very flaky. There was already a lot of effort to stabilizing them, but they are still flaky. So expect that for the next release, again, they might need to be restarted a couple of times. The integration tests for Magma are very complex. They need a complex setup, and it fails from time to time. So again, you might need to restart them multiple times. So other tests that are necessary, and I didn't fill this by design because it should be discussed with the release team. The testing strategy should be created, and the community should and needs to be jumped in here to support with testing. One thing is that there is no public community-driven hardware in a loop test lab currently. So this needs to be tackled by companies that have these resources and are interested in supporting with the release workflow. So I mean, some things are very obvious that needs to be tested: the different install flows, the upgrade flows, load testing, hardware in a loop testing, stuff like that. And of course, new features that are created should be checked with more focus. Of course, everything should be covered by automated tests, but it makes sense to at least smoke test new features to see if everything is working as expected. So from experience, this takes the most time, at least for the last release, and a lot of fixes were necessary the last time. We had a lot of feedback loops until everything was tested sufficiently. But when this is done, then the actual release can happen. So, and the release then has two steps. The first one is tagging. This is the easy part. So when we created the release branch, a couple of commits after that happened. One at least, because we needed to change the endpoints. But again, I expect that some fixes are necessary. So the release branch did receive a couple of commits. And the policy for Magma is that now the current state, after our tests are successful, are tagged with version v190. The release branch is 1.9. The tag is 190. So, and what does this represent? This tag represents the state where all release artifacts were tested successfully and are okay to be released. It can be that after the tag, again, there are new commits on the release branch, but these commits should not change the release artifacts. If the release artifacts are changed, would be changed if they are rebuilt, then we need a new release tag. But we don't want to move the current release tag 190. In this case, we need a hotfix, so we then need version 191, 192, and so on. Yeah? So this is the easy part: create the tag, but it never must be moved. So the next thing is we created all artifacts in the test repositories. For each test repository, we also have a production repository in the Artifactory. So let me give you a quick example. We have Magma packages test, where we publish our test Debian artifacts, and we have Magma packages prod. These are the production artifacts. So for Magma, the release policy is that the artifacts in prod are not rebuilt. they are copied over from Magma packages test, and it's called promoting the artifacts. Yeah? The reason is the artifacts in Magma packages test are tested. They are okay to release. We don't want to rebuild them and possibly introduce some change or error that is not tested. We want to copy the artifacts that were tested over to prod. This, again, cannot be done manually. We need workflows for this. And for this, we created 3 workflows: Debian package promoter, a Docker image promoter, and the Helm chart promoter. And again, these are new workflows. They were tested during development, but not for actual releases. So if something went wrong, is going wrong here, again, a fix would be needed on the release branch. So I think I already explained this a bit, but let's make one quick example. We have Magma packages test, tool, focal 180, and there we have BCC tools 0 to 23.1 AMD 64, and I didn't check this before, but let's hope that I'm right here. We have Magma packages prod. The difference is we don't use the pool folder here. The pool folder is for saving space by using one artifact in different distributions. We don't want to have this on the production side. There we want to have very separated distributions. So we have here focal 180 as well, and these should be the promoted test artifacts. So if I open it, then again, we see the BCC tools here, AMD 64, and this should have been copied over from the test artifactory below. Yeah. I added one to do here. This is a nice to have. It should be done at some point, but currently all artifacts are copied over during the promotion process. This is if we have changes on the release branch, every time we recreate the Magma Debian package, for example. So let's say we have 10 feedback loops until all tests were successful. Then we have 10 times the Magma Debian artifact. And for production, of course, only the last version is important. It needs to be promoted. Currently, this workflow copies over all artifacts. So this can be a little bit more become streamlined by only copying the last artifact, but it's not strictly necessary because always the newest artifact, of course, the newest version will be installed on production environments. So this workflow again is manually. You need to be in the approver CI group in order for this workflow to be successful. The Docker images need to be promoted as well. This needs a branch and a release tag as parameters, and the promote Helm charts workflow needs a Magma version. So 190 needs to be entered here, so the Helm charts get promoted as well. So after promoting, we have a couple of steps, or basically at this point, the release is done. Yeah? So it can be announced, end users can be informed that now the new Magma version can be installed in production environments, or people can upgrade their setup. So the release itself is finished, but we need a couple of steps at the end. I have listed 2 changes here. One is cut the docs for the new release. So we have the so-called Docusaurus. Everybody here knows this page. And at the top here, we see a tag. Here now we have next. So this is the documentation based on the current development. We can change it if I click on it and choose another version. So we have the pre-release version, this is next. We have the current version 1.8.0 and we have past versions. And of course, we want to create the documentation for 1.9.0. And how this can be done is documented on another page. This is already documented, the versioning process. So here it is documented what needs to be done in order to cut the Docusaurus for the next release. The last thing for the post steps is currently on master, we're already building test artifacts with the version 1.9.0. So when 1.9.0 is released, of course, on master, we want to create artifacts with the version 1.10.0. There's only one place left where this needs to be changed in this file. So this is for the Bazel created artifacts. We have at the beginning one line version, and this needs to be changed on master, not on the release branch. This needs then to be changed to 1.10.0. So new artifacts prepared for the next release are already created with this version number. So again, now the release is completely finished. Before it was finished in terms that it can be announced. Now the post steps are finished. The last three sections I have here are not important for the release anymore, but it's about hotfixes, troubleshooting, and suggested improvements for the community. But before I come to that, are there any questions in between? Then let's go through the last three sections, hotfixes versus backporting. And I already talked about this a little. The release is modeled in Git by a tag. So the tag is v190. And if we want to have a hotfix, we need to create 191 and so on. And keep in mind, if we need a hotfix, then if we are strict, then we need the complete release process I just went through, especially the testing. So you should think hard about if a hotfix is really necessary. And this is only necessary if the release artifacts change. If, for example, install scripts change, install scripts are not included in the release artifacts, then you do not need a hotfix release. This can be done directly on the release branch, but it needs to be decided from situation to situation. Yeah? And again, you need to think about if the artifacts are affected. If they are not affected, a simple backport pull request or backport change might be sufficient. For example, for the 1.8 release, until now, we had a lot of changes on the release branch for various cases. So fixing the CI and fixing install scripts, but until now it was not necessary to create new release artifacts, so we do not have version 1.8.1. A couple words about troubleshooting. One thing came to mind when I was thinking about what might be good to list here. So again, we have a hard restriction on the artifactory. So if only changes like adding or deleting artifacts can only be happened by workflows. So what happens if something is going completely wrong and damaged third-party artifacts are published? Then they need to be removed, or new version needs to be published. In some cases, it might be better to actually delete them. So I can imagine two ways to do this. One thing is to coordinate deletion of these artifacts with the Linux Foundation support. There's a channel in Slack, Questions to Linux Foundation IT. The people there are very helpful, and it might be also a good idea to coordinate a release with the Linux Foundation support, so they know about it, and they know that they might be approached because something needs to be deleted or changed in the Artifactory. If this happens very, very often, it might be a good idea to create a manual workflow, something like deleting artifacts, guarded sufficiently so not everybody can delete artifacts, but a workflow with sufficient arguments to make simple delete operations possible. And a workflow like this could be used to take care of such cleanups. So then the last point, a couple of things I had in mind by participating in the last release and writing this documentation. So in my opinion, this documentation is very long, it's complicated, and it's error prone. It should be streamlined, in my opinion. So what do I mean with this? One thing is that more parts should be modeled by CI workflows. For example, load testing. These are currently done manually. It would be a good idea to have this in CI. Hardware in a loop testing is currently not in CI. And yeah, it would be nice to have this in CI workflows so everybody in the community can see results, start these tests, and see results. Some of the existing workflows should be pipelined. Currently, the manual workflows are executed one by one manually. At the beginning, I think this is a good idea, but at some point when these workflows are stabilized and working sufficiently, it might make sense to bundle them to have a more easy way to start everything and create all artifacts in one go. Complexity should be removed, especially changing focal CI to the release distribution in various places. It might be possible to have this less complex, have the distribution at one place, change it in one place. Could also be done by a workflow, yeah, just to remove some complexity from this documentation. Existing tests should be more stabilized. As I said, the integration tests are complex. They are flaky. They need to be restarted a couple of times. In order to get sufficient results. My current understanding is on master, we don't have broken tests. We just have flaky tests. So we have workflows runs where they are successful, but sometimes it takes a lot of restarts. To have an overall goal, I wouldn't mind to actually have the goal to have a one-click release, and the next release is done and tested and everything. This might be a little bit far-fetched, but it could be at least a goal to work for in order to get at least a couple of parts more streamlined and more automated for upcoming releases. Okay, I'm done with the documentation. Are there any questions? Do you think there's something missing? Do you think there's something where we should go into more detail? Do you have any opinions? You are muted, Son.
I wanted to thank you. It's always challenging and a little bit exasperating because we don't have somebody to hand this off to, so I can understand and empathize with that. Having said that, this is a complex subject, and hopefully people will ease into it in near future. That's all I can say. It's a bit of a wishful thinking at this time.
But I'm really confident about this. I think a couple of people here today were already participating in the last release. At least Shubham was very active in the last release, and I don't know, Shubham, if you found that this was near enough to the last release, but there will still be people who have experience there.
Yeah.
Any more points? Then there will be a recording published on the Confluence page for this show and tell meeting, and I will publish this documentation. And my suggestion is there's already a page in the wiki called releases. The release process is outlined here, but not as detailed and on a technical level as the new documentation. And I would just add it below here with the title technical release process. Ben, thank you very much. We are very on time. I hope you learned something, or at least enjoyed this session. And have a good day. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.